Hello, welcome to our noontime webinar. I am Dr. Jill Brooks, Senior Director of Education for First Healthcare Compliance. At First Healthcare Compliance, we are here to help you with a comprehensive compliant management tool for your business, hospital, hospital network, provider office, billing company, or skilled nursing facility. As part of our educational webinar series, we bring experts from around the country on a variety of topics. Today's topic has been requested by multiple prior attendees. We are so pleased to have Dawn Cooper discussing an introduction to diversity as an organizational change initiative. Dawn is a manager of diversity and cultural competency at the ARC of the United States, is responsible for developing and implementing the ARC strategic plan for creating greater diversity within our chapters and ensuring we are effectively meeting the needs of a diverse community. Prior to joining the organization in March 2014, Dawn had spent her career confronting stereotypes and prejudices and removing barriers to inclusion in the workplace, as well as in programs and services. Disability became a major focus for her when, while volunteering with a disability organization in the 80s, she became the reader assistant to Eunice Fiorito, one of the early architects of the Americans with Disability Act. This experience focused her passion on working with people with disabilities and ensuring they fulfill participation in the workplace and in society as a whole. As a professional diversity consultant with 20 years experience, Dawn has consulted with organizations on ways to leverage diversity and build inclusion as an organizational imperative, and specializes in providing strategic and tactical direction to organizations looking to implement change and improve effectiveness. Previously, she has served in positions at the World Bank, AFSC, Interaction, Freddie Mac, American Express, and has been on faculty in Georgetown University's Center for Continuing and Professional Education, Strategic Diversity and Inclusion Management Certificate Program. Before we begin, you will see there's a copy of our slide deck in the control panel. Your Paycom CEU certificate will be emailed to you within 24 hours. If you are a BC Advantage member, additional CEU opportunities will be available on their website in a few weeks. Go ahead, Dawn.
Thank you very much, Jill. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this lunchtime webinar. I'm so very happy to be here with you. Unfortunately for you, if there is one thing I love talking about, it's diversity, and I can talk about it for a long, long time. But I will try and stick within the confines of the hour that I've been given, and hopefully provide you with time to answer questions at the end. So as Jill mentioned, today we want to talk about introducing diversity as an organizational change initiative. And the objectives that I have for us today are to kind of review the strategic purpose of diversity, inclusion, cultural competency, review the need for a sound organizational imperative for diversity. We want to talk about the pitfalls to avoid when developing and implementing a strategy around diversity within your chapter or organization. We want to talk about underscoring the importance of data for identifying what and when change needs to happen. And we want to explore the obstacles and barriers to diversity and strategies and identify strategies for overcoming resistance and achieving success. So, wait, get my controls back. So why diversity as an organizational change initiative? It's an important question to ask, and honestly, when I talk about diversity to people, and there's a lot of different topics we can talk about diversity, this is to me one of the most important ones when we're talking to organizations. Why does diversity need to be an organizational change initiative? Why can't it just be, a training? Why can't it just be one thing? Why can't it just be us going out and hiring more people? The reason why it needs to be an organizational change initiative is because your organization will need to change in order to become a diverse organization. And so on the very top level, if your organization looks something like this, and you want your organization to look something like a little more closer to this, then you're going to need to do some hard work within your organization to kind of make that change happen. If you're just doing a hiring initiative where you're like, okay, let's go out and get more diversity in our organization, the reality is that there are probably systems in place that aren't going to necessarily support the diversity that you're bringing in. There are probably behavior changes that need need to happen in order to support and retain the people that you're trying to bring into the organization. And so that's not just one thing. That involves the whole organization looking at and examining what's going on and making a firm commitment to do something to be something different and to be better. So let's start with what diversity is. What is diversity? Well, actually, I'd rather start with what it's not. Diversity is not affirmative action. When we talk about affirmative action, we're talking about those policies that were designed to break down barriers, to create that level playing field among all talented and qualified applicants. And it always pains me to hear how affirmative action has been turned into or has been thought of and perceived to be something else and something different, like it's for unqualified people and you're just bringing in anybody off the street in order to get them into your organization and be diverse, to make your organization diverse. It never was about that. It is an opportunity to create a level playing field and among people who, and ensure that all qualified people get an opportunity to compete at the same level. But that is not what diversity is. That is affirmative action. It's not equal employment opportunity. It's not EEO. That's basically a law stating that you cannot discriminate against certain protected classes for example, race and religion and color and national origin, age, gender identity, sex, what else? Citizenship, pregnancy. There's a variety of different protected classes out there, and that's what EEO is designed to ensure, that people are not discriminated against for housing and jobs and other systems based on those protected classes. And so that's not what diversity is either. It's not just training. I don't know how many of you have been involved in organizations where you've done a diversity training, and that's pretty much all that's going on. And you do a training and you go back to work and life goes on. So diversity is not just about training. It's not owned by human resources. Yeah, there's a lot of systems, you know, because we're looking at systems and processes within the organization, there is a human resources component to it, but it's not something that's owned by human resources. It's not minority focused. It really, really isn't. Diversity is about everybody, and so it's not just necessarily focused on minorities. It's focused on how can we be a better organization, and how can we all ensure that the organization is successful. And it's not about us versus them, whatever that us is versus whatever that them is. Once again, it's about the we. It's not, you know, it's not trying, you know, a lot of people feel that it's trying to you know, raise minorities up and move white people down. It's not about that. It really, really isn't. So what is it? So when I think about diversity, I think it's strategic. You have to be able to identify what it is you're looking for and what it is you need to change, and then put up a strategy in place in order to make the change happen. It's very tactical. It's systemic because it's also looking at the systems that your organization is operating in. It's looking at the organization system, it's looking at the group, and it's looking at the individual. It's business driven. And this is why, you know, to me, this is the most important thing to be thinking about. This work is should be tied to the business of the organization. It should be tied to the mission of the organization and what it is we're trying to do. So if you're providing health care to people in your community, you want to make sure that you're providing health care to everybody in the community. So diversity is about ensuring that we're doing all we can to meet the needs of the communities that we're working in, or selling products to the communities out there, or providing services. It should be driven and tied to the missions of our organization. It's inclusive. It's about getting everybody involved and making sure everybody has the tools and resources and support that they need to be effective within the organization. It's goal-oriented. We're putting goals in place because we need to understand where it is we need to go and what it is we need to do to get there. And it's everybody's responsibility. Where I said it's not human resources owned, what it is everybody's responsibility. So where we might be initially looking at things like, okay, what is our organization, who's made up of our organization, and how many of what do we have here, is that reflective of the community that we work in? Yeah, those are HR things, but when it comes to the products that I'm developing and the work that you're doing in the community and the companies that you're going to sell products, that's something that, everybody needs to carry the messages around diversity and inclusion to every aspect of the job that they're working in. So when we talk about diversity, it's not just this. It's not just about the differences that the dimensions of diversity that are out there: race, color, sexual orientation, disability, religion, gender identity. It's not about how many we have necessarily. It's not about when are we going to be done with it. It's not diverse just so long as you're like me. So you can be, you can have an accent, but you still have to do things the way I do things, or they're not necessarily right. And it's not about Taco Tuesdays or Soul Food Wednesdays or Fried Rice Fridays. As a diversity professional, I hate those things because I think those are the easy things that people want to do in order to try and value people's differences. But diversity is not about valuing differences per se. It's about how do we create an organization. Well, actually, let me not jump ahead. What is diversity? For me, and in the work that I've been doing over the last 20 plus years, I've come up, my definition of diversity is definitely a little more focused on the work of an organization and what it's doing. So when I think about diversity, I think about the conscious decision that an organization makes to look at its systems, look at its processes, and then create an environment that maximizes the potential of everyone for continued optimal organizational success. So when we were talking earlier about what it's not, all those knots are not in here. We just have this, what is an organization trying to do? And as organizations that are looking to have an impact and to use diversity to be more strategic, to be more focused, to have a broader outreach into the community, to improve their performance, this is what it is. It's a conscious decision. We're looking at our systems. We're trying to understand what more we can be doing, and we know that it involves making sure that we're bringing in talented individuals, and we are utilizing those talented individuals to help us be successful as an organization. So that's what diversity is for us, and that's how we need to be thinking about it as we work it in organizations. So let's look at an organizational change model and what that is. Back in 1995, John Carter, a change guru, wrote a very wonderful book called Leading Change. And in that book, he talked about an organizational change model. That is, what do you need to do within an organization to ensure the success of any change initiative that you're putting in place? And so for John, he identified 8 different steps. And so step 1 was creating a shared need for change. That is, that we need to ensure that everybody, that when we're thinking about the change that we're trying to implement, that everybody needs to, we need to present it in a way that everybody can feel a part of it, that everybody can recognize that this is something that needs to happen and that we all need to get behind it. Now, step 2, form a powerful coalition. Buy-in is so very important, and it's so necessary to be able to identify people who can help move this change forward, who can continue to speak to how necessary and important the change is, and who can help and support individuals throughout the organization to do what it is they need to do in order to help the change initiative be successful. We also, and step 3 is creating a change vision. That is, what is it that we're trying to be? And it's so important to be able to state and clearly state what your status quo is, so that then you can think about where is it that you'd like to be. If we are here where we're doing very well in this one particular community, but and that's been fine for the time that we've been operating. Now we want to do more, and we want to be able to provide our services to everybody that's out there. and we think that that's a wonderful thing to do, and we're going to need to do something different in order to be able to do that. That's the vision. And so you want to create a vision and let people know and identify, moving into step 4, you got to let people know that this is where we're going, and it's going to be a wonderful place, and it's going to help us do wonderful things, and it's going to help us be even more successful than we need to be. So you have to create that vision for people, and you have to let them know what that is so that they can get behind that too and help you start moving forward. So step 5 in John's organizational change model is removing obstacles. And we cannot pretend that there aren't obstacles to change. And in organizations that have been around for a long time and have taken and have, operated in a certain way for probably a long time, there are probably going to be some people and some obstacles out there that are going to say, I don't know why we need to change. I think, we're doing just fine as we are, and we're just asking for trouble if we try to do something else. So you have to be able to identify those obstacles and remove those obstacles if you want your change to be successful. Step 6 for John was create short-term wins. Let people see that you're being successful, that, get some of that low-hanging fruit and show people that, yeah, see that even though we're on this journey and we have this strategy and this process in place, here's what success is looking like right now, and we can just imagine what it will look like when we're done. Step 7, build on the change. Don't just, you have to continuously think about how the change is impacting other things going on within the organization, and think about how you can continue to build on it in order to help your organization grow. And for and John's step 8 in organizational change is to anchor the changes in the corporate culture. And this to me is something that a lot of people, that is the challenge, one of the biggest challenges around the change initiatives, is creating, making sure the change is reflective in the culture of the organization. And a lot of times I call diversity work cultural change work, because we do need to do something different. And if we think about the organizational cultures that we have, those formal and informal rules that kind of guide people's interactions and behaviors and the way things are done, if you think about it, those are a lot of times the things that are obstacles to change, because we don't necessarily we don't necessarily consider how strong organizational culture is to how things get done within the organization. And so if we're not embedding and anchoring the changes that we're trying to make in the organizational culture, we're potentially setting ourselves up for failure, because people will revert back to the culture if they don't see that it's something that's going to last and something that's going to be, that they're going to be held accountable for. So John, this was a wonderful organizational change model, and but as I've been working in diversity so long, I was thinking that, when I think about diversity change and how we need to approach it within organizations, I was thinking that maybe we need to start looking at it from a diversity organizational change model, and seeing how things we can kind of nip and tuck a few things to make it a little more specific and focused to what we need to do as diversity change agents. So, step 1, when we talk about creating a shared need for change, to me, that involves assessment and understanding what our status quo is and what it is we need to do, and recognizing that if we, this is where we are, and we definitely want to do something differently so we can be more effective and more successful, that will help us create that shared need for change. So it's getting information and data and saying, look, here's what's happening. Here's who's accessing our programs. Here's who's taking advantage of our services. Here's who's buying our products. We're not, and what we might see is that we are not maximizing we're not as deeply embedded in the community as we could be. Then that's a reason that starts creating that shared vision of, we need to do something different, and we need to figure out what that is. So doing that assessment in step 1. In step 2, I've kind of modified it a little bit to identify and educate your diversity champions. And we're going to go through all of these in a little bit more detail, well, for the rest of the session. But, so it's getting those stakeholders together, and it's getting those people who can help you understand and help you move the initiative forward. For step 3, we've talked about, I labeled that as creating an organizational imperative. And what we'll talk about later is, why are we doing this? What impact is this going to have on who we are as an organization and what we're trying to accomplish? In step 4, we have communicating the vision. It's so important to let people know and understand what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and we cannot underestimate the importance of keeping people informed and continuously tying it into what it is the organization is trying to accomplish, and also what does it mean to them in the work that they're doing. 5 remains the same. We need to remove obstacles. We need to identify obstacles and remove them. And I think with diversity, one of the challenges that I've seen in my long tenure doing this work is that we're not always very good, and we're not always willing to look at the obstacles that are out there. We often believe that this is such important work, and it's the right thing to do, and it's necessary, just for social justice issues or for whatever reasons, that we think that everybody's going to be on board. But we're talking about issues that can touch people at the very core of who they are. And so yes, whether intentionally or unintentionally, there will be obstacles out there. And so we have to be strong enough to face them, identify them, and remove them as best we can. Step 6, creating a diversity strategy. That's the strategic part of when we talked about what diversity is. We have to think about strategically what it is we want to do, where it is we want to go. So we'll talk about what that looks like. Step 7, measuring and reporting progress. We cannot forget, if you're putting initiatives that you cannot measure the impact of it or show how it relates to the goals that you're trying to achieve, people are not going to believe that this is something that's necessary and important. So you should be putting goals in place that are measurable and attainable, and you should be measuring those and reporting it out to people as often as you can. I have kept the anchor that changes in the corporate culture because, as I mentioned before, I think it's so very important. I see diversity as a cultural change initiative, a change in the organizational culture, how we think, how we do things, how we approach the work that we're doing. And so it's very, very important to recognize and acknowledge that, and then build a plan that will help see that that happens. And then I added a step 9 is anchoring the changes in the business plan. And this is part of the organizational change. If we really want people to understand and get behind what we're doing, we have to formalize it by anchoring the work that we're doing in the business of the organization, and not just believing that it's part of the business of the organization. We have to state it and show and demonstrate how it's part of the business of the organization, which means, when we're reporting out the business of the organization, this should be part of that as well. All right, so it's so interesting on a webinar, as I take a moment to aside, that normally when I'm talking in front of a group of people and I'm training, and they're always like, there's questions, but I don't know if you have questions. So, and I like to ask a lot of questions too, so I have to stop myself from asking questions of you guys. But we will be calling for questions at the end, and if you want to put something in the chat box, we'll try and see, you can ask questions during the session. So let's take this in a little more detail and talk about what these different steps can look like. So creating a shared need for change, step 1, the assessment. Now, so what does an assessment provide? It provides information, at its most basic, and so why would we do an assessment? Well, how do we know what we're going to work on or what we need to work on unless we look at our organization and try and understand who we are? So we're going to, so some of the areas that we might be looking at are, or needing to work on are around hiring, what barriers may be in place, what does our rewards and recognition programs look like, succession planning, what's customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, program development, market share, promotions. there are so many aspects of your organization that this impacts and influences. But what do we know what we need to do unless we take that time to take a step back and say, let's find out. Let's ask the questions. Let's look at the data. Let's analyze the data, and let's use that to put together a plan to say, you know, we need to be doing better. And so where are the areas we need to be doing better? And that's the basis and foundation of our strategic plan. So the benefits of the assessment, oh my goodness, it helps us develop a strategic action plan. It can help us gauge the degree to which our organization is effectively addressing the needs of its core population. And I don't know how, you know, who necessarily is on the phone and what different organizations you're with, or if you're all with, you know, First Healthcare. But you know, we all have a population that we work with. And for me here at the ARC, our population is, you know, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, their family members, and other organizations that are working with this population. And so what brought me here into the organization was the belief that we were not reaching and effectively addressing the needs of our core population, that there were potentially people in other communities that were not necessarily having access to the services and supports that we were providing. And so when I first came in, what I did was look at the data, try to understand what's happening now and where are we possibly falling short, and see what more we can be doing. It also helps us determine the knowledge and skills and interests and needs of the staff. What do our staff need to do in order to be able to help this organization move forward? What about our board members? What about our organizational membership, the other stakeholders that are engaged in the work that we're doing? How do we know what they need to do, and what knowledge they have and what knowledge they need to have, unless we assess it? It can also help us improve access, utilization, outcomes, satisfaction, you know, by telling us what's going on. You know, I've been in organizations that do employee satisfaction surveys every year, to some that do it every 5 years, to some that do it every 10 years, and the same with customers as well. Those who are constantly trying to understand what their customers need versus those who are just like, I think we're doing pretty good, so we're okay. It helps you establish meaningful partnerships. Because you know who it is now that you are working with, you can also identify who it is you're not working with and who you should possibly be working with in order to help you do the things that you need to do. And it can also help you determine the strengths and areas for growth for your organization and its staff. What more do you need? Where do we need to grow? Where do we need to develop? How do we need to continue to progress as an organization? And what staff do we need in our organization in order to help us do that? And so when you want to do an assessment, and this kind of varies for people, but the common understanding is that you want to do an assessment when you believe that something needs to change. You're looking around, you got a feeling, you got a sense, the competition's right there on your butt, and you're like, okay, we need to do something different. Let's do an assessment. When you created buy-in for it, people, there's this rule, school of thought that says you absolutely need to have buy-in to do an assessment, because you want people to be able to give you information, because not all the information that you're going to be getting is going to be that objective information. Some of it's going to be, tell us what's going on, tell me what your perspective is, tell me what you're seeing, as opposed to, let's look at the numbers, let's pull the numbers for the past 5 years, let's do this, let's do that. So you're going to have to create that buy-in and let people know we need to understand so we can be better, so we need to gather this information. And also when you're ready to act, you'd be surprised at how long it takes people to be ready to move forward with a change initiative. And quite honestly, they should take their time, but you don't want to do the assessment before you're actually ready to act on whatever you find out from the assessment. So when you want to do it, when you know change needs to happen, when you're sure people are bought into the fact that okay, let's try and do something different, and when you're ready to act on whatever it is you discover, that's when you want to do an assessment. Okay, so let's move to step 2 about identifying and educating your diversity champions. And I put in educating diversity champions because in my experience, and I've worked with a lot of diversity champions over my career, and the reality is that, I come in as a diversity professional, meaning that I've worked in this field for a long time, and I've spent and focused a lot of my time and energy and attention to learning about what the impact of this can be in an organization, studying and educating myself, and taking long moments of every day, examining my own motivations and my own biases and stereotypes and prejudices, and so I'm not quite sure why we think that just everybody else has been doing the same thing and can just come right up and be an immediate champion. So when I put identify and educate your diversity champions, I mean that it's a process. It's a process to become a true diversity champion, and we have to remember that as well. So what is a diversity champion? Well, they are those organizational members who assume the role of facilitating the change initiative in your organization. That is, they're the leaders, and they're the formal and informal leaders in your organization. So your CEO, your executive director, your president, they have to be a diversity champion. They're the ones that that drive what is going on within the organization, and people are going to look to them to say, this is very serious, I need you to do this, as opposed to silence, and I'm the only one out there saying something, and who's going to listen to me after a while. So the diversity champion has to be somebody who has to be those formal leaders, your CEO, your senior leadership team, your your middle management. They have to be and they're also people who want to see change happen. Those informal people who are also like, this, we need to do something, and I'm willing to work with my team, my group, my department, and with the organization to help that change happen. So they're a conduit for disseminating information. They're the voice. They're the ones who are talking about it. And when we said earlier that diversity is a responsibility of everybody, champions are the first ones who are out there showing that I'm taking ownership and responsibility for this. I want you to take ownership and responsibility for this. So they're talking about it, and they're embedding it into the work that they're doing. They're driving the behavioral and cultural change across the organization because they're modeling that behavior, and they're letting people know that they're expecting people to demonstrate new behaviors and to start integrating this into the culture of the organization. They're the ones who are continuously reinforcing the link between diversity and the organization's goals and objectives. They're the ones who are showing. So if I have the business, at American Express, I had the president of establishment services. Those were that was the department that went out and got establishments to accept the American Express card. So sent their satellites out to go to Macy's and to go to, a Hex or wherever you guys are, or, ShopRite, Giants, to say you should accept the American Express card because there are tons of people in your area who have it and want to use it here. So so I had the president of that department and the president of other departments who would then not only talk about why it's important for the organization, but then create those ties and synergies to the work that they're doing. So for the president of Establishment Services, he's like, if we want more people well, you know, if we want everybody to have an American Express card, we need to make sure that if we put an American Express card in their hands, that they can use it in the communities that they work in. So, you know, so he's making those connections and saying we need to broaden where we're going to ensure that everybody who has a card can use their card in their communities. So they're making those connections. And then they communicate effectively about diversity and inclusion to a range of audiences. So wherever they're going, wherever conversations they're having, we hope that they're embedding these notions of, you know, getting our, making sure that everybody has access to the work that we're doing, the products that we're developing, the services that we're providing. They're reinforcing those messages wherever they're going. So that's, you know, those are some of the roles that a diversity champion plays. And so when you're looking for them, you want to let them know that, you know, it's not just a figurehead position. It's a, you know, you have to actively step up and be that voice, because they carry more authority than, you know, than me. Um, so why do you need diversity champions? Well, because champions provide leadership. They provide accountability, they provide support, and they're giving you that voice, that opportunity to say, you know, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, you know, you need to get on board. But what do you need to provide to your champions? You need to provide education. Like I said, you know, I've been working at this for a long, long time. And, you know, and so I've been training myself, and I've been to lots of education, a lot of work, looking at how the impact of culture and you know, and how I developed my lens and perspective on the world, and how that can influence the work that I do, and how that can influence the relationships I have with people. So I've spent my life looking at doing this kind of examination and helping people. You know, I cannot expect my champions to just automatically know how to go out and do those kinds of things too. So I have to be able to provide them with education, help them to learn more about the impact of diversity on and the more informal work of diversity on individual behaviors and attitudes and perceptions. And I also have to provide them with information about what this looks like and what it means and the impact that it can have. And a lot of times it's coaching as well. And whether it's coaching from me in my position, and I've served that role for a lot of senior executives, it might be coaching externally as well, where we'll get somebody external to say, why don't we sit down and have these conversations about what this can look like and what this means, and at least give people an opportunity to start asking themselves questions about what they can do and what they believe this means to the organization. And so who are your champions? Like I said, you know, there are senior leadership team members, they're employee leaders, middle management leaders. If you have employee resource groups or employee networks within your organizations, they can be your champions as well. If you have diversity team members, and that's what I've had in my larger organizations like American Express, like Amoco, where there's hundreds thousand employees across the world, you know, we might have diversity teams in each department in order to help support the work moving within the organization. So those team members, and many organizations I've been in have had a diversity council made up of either senior leaders in the organization or cross-functional, cross-sectional leaders, employees from the organization. You know, so those individuals are obviously champions as well. But once again, we have to educate our champions. We have to give them the tools and resources that they need to be successful as a champion, and we have to make ourselves available to them to be able to answer any questions or concerns that they have about the role that they're playing. But you need to get those champions out there, because as a diversity professional, I can't be the only voice for change in the organization around this. You know, I need other voices to come to the table as well. So step 3, creating an organizational imperative. And if I'm saying this over and over again for each of these steps, then you can definitely call me out at the end. But this is one of the most important ones, and I think I might be saying that for every one of them. But to me, creating an organizational imperative is amazingly important. And what is an organizational imperative? An organizational imperative pretty much states why your organization should undertake a diversity initiative. It answers that question for your organization. So as you look at and you look at the data and you look at what you see and you look at what's happening within your organization, what you'll want to do is craft a statement that says, this is why we're going to do what it is we're going to do. You know, we looked at, you know, whether it's about changing workforce demographics, whether it's about the evolving nature of the workforce and the evolving nature of the communities that we operate in, whether it's about maximizing diverse markets, whether it's about recruiting and retaining top talents, or whether it's about improving performance, productivity, or being more sustainable and being able to grow effectively, or whether it's about increasing adaptability that ensures our survival. Whatever it is that drives our business, we need to let people know that why we're doing this is tied into that. You know, we want to do, you know, we believe that maximizing, putting ourselves, we believe that diversity and a focus and attention on diversity is going to help us, hire, recruit, and retain top talent and outreach effectively into the diverse marketplaces. You know, it's that kind of statement that will allow people to see that, okay, it's about the business. This isn't about, you know, you're just being politically correct, and oh my God, I hate that term, because I see it's just a way to just be rude to people. But it's not about being politically correct. It's not about, you know, trying to get people, it's not taking away meritocracy and putting something else in its place. This is about how we do business, and whatever our business is. And you know, and I work in a nonprofit now, so we're not necessarily business focused, but we do have we do have a mission. We do have something that we're trying to do, and it might not be rooted in profit, but it's definitely rooted in service. And if our mission is to provide support and services to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and advocate for their rights, their human and civil rights, then that's our driver. And if we think being our diverse organization is going to help us do that, then what work do we need to do in order to help us do that? So that's where an organizational imperative come in. So it's tied into performance, it's tied into outcomes, it's tied into the culture of the organization, it's tied into the community, your clients, and your stakeholders. So when you're thinking about why you're doing the work that you're doing, and you're thinking about how do you talk, how do you say it and make it meaningful to employees in your organization, this is what your organizational imperative will do. And this is what you'll want to tie it to. So a good organizational imperative will, you know, expect and sustain a long-term effort. It's not just, I just want to do something, you know, for today and then that'll be great. No, our organizational imperative here states that we want our products and services to be accessible to everybody, and especially people from, you know, underrepresented communities. So it's a long-term sustainable effort that we're not going to change later on. It's something that will accept a new demographic reality in the country. You know, people think that, you know, and I always, and I write this down, and I've been saying it for years, but I firmly believe that one of the reasons that the new demographic reality is a little bit of a misnomer, in the sense that, you know, the diversity has always been there. It's always been there in the world. It's always been here in our country. It's always been everywhere. And where a lot of people have been knee-jerk reacting against diversity, saying that it causes all this angst and it causes all this grief, and maybe we should not be so diverse. You know, my way of thinking is that the world is diverse, and trying to pretend that it's not is not going to get you anywhere. And so what we really need to do is to be thinking about how we react to that diversity and how we react to and how we accept and acknowledge the fact that diversity is there, and you know, and we can achieve so much more together than we can apart. So but that's off my soapbox. But let's get back. So yes, a good organizational imperative will help people continue to accept that, you know, demographics and diversity are out there, and, you know, and potentially in our community that we're operating in, or the work that we're trying to do, we need to really, really pay more attention to it. That's what your organizational imperative will help you do. It's going to help you make rapid change more constant and be willing to pierce the power and work through the discomfort. That's the tough work of diversity. You know, it makes people uncomfortable, and we have to recognize that. And it's going to be honest, and it's going to spread goodwill. It's going to help you demonstrate commitment at the highest level and seek involvement from the bottom up. Everybody has to be involved, and will help you integrate diversity into the fabric of the organization. So step 4, communicating the vision. Why do we communicate? Well, it's a bit of a no-brainer. We want to create buy-in, and we also want to solidify our buy-in. We want to make sure people understand what it is we're going to do. So we didn't just, you know, talk to you about it during the assessment phase. Now that we're getting going and we've got an organizational imperative in place, which represents our vision, we need to you know, continue to solidify that buy-in by showing you and showing employees in the organization that this is why we're doing this and this is where we're trying to go. And we need to reinforce the importance and the necessity for change. And I think a lot of change failure happens when people don't want to reinforce and they don't want to look at this stuff more closely. They don't want to continue to do that. Who needs to know? Everyone, the world, the community, your customers, your shareholders. You need to be continuously finding ways to embed these concepts and knowledge into your organizations. Removing obstacles. They must be identified and they must be reviewed. Some organizational barriers that you may run into. Cost of implementation. For some organizations, it is, you know, there is work that needs to be done, and resources that need to be spent in order to make some of the change happen. So there, you know, so there's a fear of cost that needs to be addressed, and also the, you know, at least a very clear awareness of what really needs to happen and how we can get it done. You know, there's a fear of hiring underskilled and uneducated employees, but as somebody who's been in human resources a lot, you know, I've seen that there's never, you know, we're always hiring underskilled and uneducated employees, which is why we put that 90-day, you know, a plan in place to kind of like, you know, probationary period, so we can you know, correct any mistakes we made in the hiring practice. But for some reason, when it comes to diversity, that fear is very, very big, and it needs to be addressed. You know, there's a strong belief in a system that favors merit, and we're not trying to take away a merit-based system per se, but we need to recognize and acknowledge that there have been barriers to that, and barriers based on a variety of different characteristics that often have nothing to do with merit. So we need to address that obstacle. Reverse discrimination, and as a diversity professional, I hate that term too, because I just believe in discrimination. But then again, I believe that everybody, you know, everybody has work to do around diversity. You know, and there's no one group that's better at it than any other. Every group needs to work at this, and every group can discriminate, and every group needs to acknowledge that and do their work in order to rectify that. So I just believe in discrimination, so I don't like it against any group, and I'm going to work hard to make sure that it doesn't happen to anybody. But you'll hear that in your organizations, that it's not a top priority issue. There's going to be people who are going to want to fight this and think that there's so many more other important things to do. However, because we're rooting this into the business of the organization, hopefully that'll be you know, that will help diminish that obstacle. And the size of the organization can definitely be an impact, because that means you really have to be strategic about how you go about doing this change initiative in larger organizations. And what kind of impact will it have on the existing systems? If you're doing it Some people like the way things are done within the organization, but to do this work effectively, 9 times out of 10, your systems are going to have to change in order to ensure that there are no barriers or adverse impact within them. So, these are some of the barriers, and you'll have to look for the ones in your organizations that are more particular to you. But you have to acknowledge them, and you have to identify them, and you have to work to remove them. So a diversity strategy, we need to create a diversity strategy. And so strategic planning, what does it do for us? Well, it allows us to focus. It allows us to identify goals and then tie to those goals, what are the outcomes that we're looking for? And then it also allows us to show progress. And a good strategic plan should be about addressing critical performance issues. It should be about creating that right balance, and this is very important, which I believe is why I put it in gold. It's between that balance between what an organization is capable of doing versus what the organization would like to do. One of the things that I always make clear wherever I go and whatever organization I'm working with is that, I can only take an organization where it wants to go. And so, a lot of my work is sometimes like, we want to be like this. And you're like, okay, that's great. But are you, do you have the infrastructure in place to go there? And then do you really, really, really want to be there? Because there's nothing like trying to take an organization to here when the reality is they're only really capable of going, here. So, creating that right balance. And it's got to cover a sufficient time period to help close the performance gap. So it's not necessarily that, the strategic plan should be rooted in a time frame and not left open to, yeah, we'll get there someday. Well, we should be able to achieve this within like 5 years or 10 years, and then let's think about what else needs to happen. It should be visionary, convey a desired future end state. It should be flexible and allow for and accommodate additional change that happens. If something's going on in the community, in the environment that requires there to be adjustments, or wow, we did something new, and so this happened sooner and much easier than we thought. Let's do something more. It should be flexible, and it should it should guide decision making at every level, meaning at the operational level, at the tactical level, and at the individual level. Everybody should be touched by the work in the strategic plan. So how do we take strategy to action? So we've identified the issues, our challenges, our opportunities. We've identified the desired outcomes. We've put that into a strategic plan. Now we need to move that to an action plan. And so what do action plans do? Well, they identify the specific steps that we can take to achieve goals and objectives, and they help us identify resources and identify communication channels, describe who does what and when it's going to be completed, and it has monitoring and evaluation attached to it. So measuring and reporting, very, very important. Your initiatives should be measurable. They should be attainable. What are you measuring? Well, what aren't you measuring? You should be measuring. There's so much to measure. And so when people come to me and say, what should we be measuring? Well, I mean, within your organization, who's leaving? Who's hiring? Who are we hiring? Who's leaving our organization? Who's staying? Is there adverse impact in our pay? Who's using our services? What do our customers think? What do our employees think? What impact is our marketing having? So there are these things encompass the entire organization and the work the entire organization is doing. So once again, reinforcing that message that this isn't just about human resources. This isn't just about what's, employees. It's about what we're doing as an organization and the kinds of the ability we have to do more with our clients or customers or the people we provide services to. So how do we anchor the changes in the corporate culture? So we have to identify competencies. We have to identify behavior. We have to train and hire on that new behavior. We have to reinforce the behavior change that we want to see, and we have to reward it. This is my problem also with diversity training per se, is because a lot of times we do diversity training in a vacuum. You know, it's usually the first thing that a lot of companies do when it technically should be the last thing or come almost toward the end, you know, or at least in the middle of what an organization does. But you have to understand, what is it that you want people to be doing, and how is it that, what competencies do you want them to have? I want them to be culturally competent. That is, being aware that culture does play an impact, and when I'm doing something, let me think about what that impact can have on different cultures, and so on and so forth. You know, and there's other competencies. But once I identify the competencies and the behaviors that I'm looking for, I need to train people on that if they don't know it. Or even better, I'd like to hire people and bring people in who already have this competency or already have demonstrated these behaviors. And then I need to reinforce that back in the job, because how many times have you gone to training and you just you come back to your desk and you don't have and nobody talks about it again. So you have to reinforce that learning, and then we have to reward people for it. That's how you anchor into an organizational culture. And to anchor it into a business plan, your organizational imperative starts that process, but you know, we report out our results and our successes at the end of the year, so has to happen with diversity as well. And then we have to have, we need to embed it in our corporate scorecard. All leaders know that there's a corporate scorecard that talks about, you know, the targets and the goals that we've had for the year and how did we do. Diversity and the work that you're doing on this should be part of that. And so that once again embeds it into the organization. So quickly, I wanted to go over top 10 reasons why diversity initiatives fail. A good friend of mine, Dr. Christopher Metzler, put this together in the Diversity Factor in 2003, and I just love it. I share it with everybody because it gives people something to think about. So for example, one reason why diversity efforts fail, um, we don't address the issues of deeper issues of discrimination and marginalization. And that's where training comes in, and that's where assessment comes in, because we need to understand that a lot of the systems that we have in place have been probably rooted in some biased behaviors, some systemic bias that's led to barriers going on. And so we need to address and at least acknowledge that those things have happened and may be part of the systems that we have in place today. But a lot of people don't necessarily want to do that. So because they don't want to do that, they kind of leave those barriers in place without necessarily recognizing it. Hey, look at that. Failure to view diversity as organization change. It needs to be an organizational change initiative. It can't just be, let's do some training because, you know, the racist jokes are getting out of hand. No, it's got to be more than that. And if you do it right and you think of it as organizational change and culture change, those things should go by the wayside. Failure to examine how much change can be accommodated and in what increments. And that's what I just alluded to in our previous discussion, that sometimes, you know, organizations want to move faster than they're capable of, or they're too ambitious, and the system, the organizational system, cannot handle that ambition. Sometimes you're going to have to move slow, and that's okay. Failure to address the systemic issues, failure to clearly and comprehensively articulate why you're promoting diversity. Organizational imperative, failure to engage white men. I mean, there it is. And, you know, if I look at pictures, one of the things that online you see at an organization that I'm looking at, you know, the senior leadership team's pictures are usually up there, and it's still so interesting to see, you know, how many white men are still at the leadership of a lot of organizations that we look at. They have to be engaged, and their fears have to be acknowledged and discussed. And if you're not going to engage white men in the process, because remember, this is about everybody, you're not going to be successful. Poor diversity training and education, and I talked about ineffective. I didn't really talk about poor, but the training has to be rooted in what the organization is trying to do, and it has to be something that's embedded in the culture and reinforces the behaviors that you want. Lack of authentic diversity leadership, where those are champions again. Selecting incompetent consultants, and that's a shame. But you know, I think it's important to vet your consultants very carefully, but also make sure that they understand very clearly what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then there's lack of accountability. Nobody wants to be accountable for the change. Your diversity department cannot be the only ones responsible and accountable for the change happening. Everybody has to take accountability. So where are some questions I put in here for you to consider as you're thinking about diversity within your own organizations? What is your organizational imperative? What does commitment look like to you? What do you think your staff and the rest of your organization needs to see? Who do you feel most needs to be part of the discussion? What are you seeing now? What's your status quo? What's your vision? And what are the one or two biggest challenges to the success of your initiative, of you being a diverse, culturally competent organization? So what to remember? You got to recognize that diversity is not about them, it's about us. It's about all of us and how we can all make this success, all create a successful organization. You have to face the fear of change and the perceived losses to the status quo. A lot of people like the way the organization is now, so you're going to have to address that and help people to see that this is going to be make us a better organization. Create a more fluid power structure. Power is huge, and people don't want to lose power, and so we have to let them know it's not about losing power, you know, and there's plenty of power to go around, and it's about you know, how we're going to be effective. You got to shed those predictable habits and learn new behaviors. Get beyond ethnocentrism, you know, create that common culture in the organization that we can all, that encourages everybody to take part in. Emphasize those common experiences that unify rather than divide. We want to demonstrate our values through actions and not just words. And remember, again, that diversity includes everyone. So, I did talk a lot, and I apologize for that. I just can't help it. But I'd be willing to, if anybody has any questions that they want to put in the chat box, I'd be happy to take them now. I think we have a few minutes. If not, then you can always email me at cooper@thearc.org. Give me a call or visit our website, and you'll find me there. Or you can even friend me on, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to make new acquaintances. Jill?
Hi, Dawn. Thank you. Thank you for such a great presentation. Thank you to the attendees for joining us today. Please go ahead and download her handout if you haven't done so already before the session ends. If you have any questions, please use Dawn's contact information on the screen, or you can contact us and we will forward the questions to her. Your CEU certificate will be sent to you automatically within 24 hours. We have many interesting topics for our upcoming webinar series, and we always welcome suggestions for future topics. Please join us again for next week's webinar on September 20th, Preventing and Addressing Workplace Harassment, which will also offer CME for the live broadcast. You can go to our website at 1sthcc.com or call us at 888-543-4778 to register for any future webinar and also to request a demo of our compliance management solution. Thank you and have a great day.